Connor, hey buddy. Just wanted to wish you a big congrats for hitting the 100 episode mark. Very much enjoyed our time together on the podcast a couple weeks ago. Really can't wait to see what 100 episode looks like for you. Can't wait to hear what 100 more look like for you after that. Thanks again for your time. Thanks again for the space. I think you're doing amazing work. Keep it up.
So, well, what can I say about Open Talent? First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to this. It's not often I get the opportunity to feedback like this, but I want to say a few things about Open Talent in the podcast. I think it's cutting edge. I think it's one of those resources for all kind of industries, because we can see something which is both great content and even better contributors. So it's something I would absolutely recommend to everyone, and something I've been delighted to be part of. And then what can we say about Connor himself? Well, look, we all know him. He's passionate, he's fun, he's incredibly smart. He can be provocative, which is a good thing in our line of work, but he does everything with a great deal of humility, and he's a true gentleman. So yeah, top bloke, and lovely for me to be given an opportunity to speak like this. So thank you.
Hi, it's John Younger, and I'm here to say thank you to Connor Heaney. I understand it's your 100th podcast, and that is quite extraordinary. I'm a big fan of yours, and I'm a big fan of yours for several reasons. One, Connor, you are an insightful guy. You help me to understand stuff that's really very, very helpful. There aren't a lot of people that I turn to on a regular basis to teach me, and you're certainly one of them. Second, you're generous. You invite people on your podcast that you may not agree with, but you want the world to hear what they have to say. And three, you're fun. It's fun listening to your podcast. There's a sense of humor. There's a real engagement. There's laughing as much as there's serious. So for all of those reasons, Connor, congratulations. I'm looking forward to the number 200 podcast if you're interested. And this is John Younger saying thank you so much for what you've given me as one of your fans. Take care.
Hello, it's Barry Matthews here from Bench Talent Cloud, and I understand it's Connor's 100th episode of the Open Talent Report. Goodness me, how did that happen? Hard to believe. It feels like only yesterday that Connor came on How the Future Works podcast that Eleanor and I were hosting, and was an amazing guest. And now he's taken the podcasting world by storm, and he has an amazing podcast, one of my favourites. I'm videoing this down in the southwest of England, down in Dartmouth by the seaside. So if you can hear seagulls in the background, that's why. What do I like about Connor's podcast? And I really do subscribe and listen to it. I listen to it when I'm running or when I'm commuting, and I do find it interesting. It's one of the few industry podcasts that I do listen to regularly. I think it's informative. I learn stuff on or by listening to the podcast. There's always something a little bit different, and every day's a school day, so it's always good to learn stuff listening to Connor's podcast. Secondly, it has great guests, really good guests actually, from all sides of the industry, people that I find interesting listening to. So yeah, really good cross-section of guests, unlike some other podcasts where they always sort of have the same sort of genre. So really good cross-section. Thirdly, it's actually quite informal and fun. So it's like, you know, you're having a coffee or a pint or whatever, and it's actually enjoyable. It's quirky. Connor's always laughing. The guests are generally put at ease. So yeah, it's a really fun, quirky podcast. What can I say about Connor for his 100th episode? Handsome, charming, erudite. These are all words he can spell. No, he's a consummate professional. He's a very nice guy. He's very knowledgeable. He's good fun, and I look forward to having a pint with him fairly soon to say well done and congratulations on your 100th episode. Thank you.
Well, it's a really amazing milestone to have 100 podcast episodes, which means 100 podcast guests, which means 100 business leaders in the human capital sector that have very kindly given their time to talk to me and, of course, to talk to our audience. There's three things that I've definitely taken from the show, listening to some of the biggest business leaders in our sectors across the globe. One is humility. Humility matters as a business leader. No one knows all the answers, and it's important to stay humble, because you can be hero one day, zero the next. So I love that sense of humility that has come across from the CEO of Randstad Enterprise to the CEO of Beeline, to people like Jill Bassett from Fieldglass, that's humility. Despite those folks achieving great success, it looks like outward success, they've built phenomenal businesses and phenomenal teams. And it strikes me that they've been able to do that by being humble and by having that real humility. I think the second thing that I've learned from hosting the show is that business leaders don't know all the answers, and the best business leaders are not afraid rather to say, I don't know all the answers, but I want to work with you and I want to find out how we can solve these problems and find out the answers together. I think the third thing that I've definitely observed, particularly over the last 3 years, is that AI is coming. The AI revolution is here, and organizations and society have not fully prepared for the potential negative and societal implications of AI unfettered. I think the other thing that I've observed from listening and hosting on the podcast is that the sector that we're in, human capital, is constantly innovating. It's also ripe for disruption and ripe for disintermediation. The old way of doing things is going, and there's some amazing technology and companies out there that are doing great things to match talent and opportunity. So I think, although we're concerned about AI, I think the future's bright from an innovation standpoint. Hosting the podcast has definitely made me reflect on work-life balance and maybe not having the right level of work-life balance, if indeed that exists. I think what I've observed and listened to from most of our business leaders that have come on the show is that of course business matters, but family, friendship, and spending time out of the business matters more, because that allows you to be energized, refreshed, ready, and to be a better business leader. And also, sometimes it's important to take a step back, not a step out, but don't always be reacting, but better to respond. And there's a difference between reacting and responding. And responding, to me, seems the better bet, because react, I've always thought, yeah, I've got this great gut instinct, right, as a business leader, and maybe I do, and maybe I don't. But what I've learned from listening to our guests is that it's better to respond. So to observe, to orientate, to decide, and to act. I think what I've learned from hosting the show on a professional basis is the following. One, you can be a nice person and still build and run a business. You don't have to sacrifice your human decency and a moral compass. You can still have that and actually survive and thrive. The second thing is about doing the right thing for your people, as in your team and your business, but also doing the right thing for your customers. And that was a chord that ran through nearly every single episode, was doing the right thing. You can be nice, you can be grateful, and you can still get the results. And that's really what I've loved, learning from business leaders and hearing their journey. I think the third thing is most of the people that entered the human capital space as recruiters and staffing leaders, I don't think it was ever their desired career path. Most of them wanted to be lawyers, doctors, engineers, and all of them fell into it. But even though they fell into it, it's a very meritocratic sector to be in. And if you're good enough, you can get to the top pretty quickly. And I think that was another commonality. So the commonality is no one really knew what they were getting into, but they've made a success of it, and they're now running, in some cases, multi-billion-dollar companies, which I think is absolutely fascinating, particularly for those that never chose to get into the sector. I never thought we'd get to 100 episodes with 100 guests, and I read somewhere that the original podcast guru, Seth Godin, who's one of the world's best marketers, right, and probably invented the podcasting format, or at least heavily influenced it. If you got to 100 episodes, he would have you on the show. But I think there's been a proliferation of podcasts in that time period, and I don't think you can have enough 100 episode guests or podcast hosts on the show. But my aspiration really is to ensure that the podcast continues to be a source of education for the human capital space, that it continues to be a source of inspiration for our listeners, because there's some really valuable insights and experience and stories that I think our listeners can take and apply in their own lives and their own businesses that will really make a difference. And it really comes down to doing that right thing. So continuing to educate, continuing to inspire, and continuing to grow our listenership. I'm really excited about that, and I can't wait to see what the future lies. And our intention is to get to 200 episodes, so let's do it. What makes the podcast so special is not just our guests, not just our listeners, but the people behind the show, that make the show, that edit the show, that produce the show, that distribute the show, that organize the guests and deal with all the requests and the multiple diary changes and rescheduling and scheduling. So I'd like to thank our marketing leader for Europe, Pete Botto, and also Mike Wells, and also all the people over the years from Barbara Boltis to Conor Lavelle that have helped produce and edit the show. So thanks very much, guys. You make the show. It's the sum of all parts. I'm just merely the front guy that's asking the questions, but you guys are doing the hard work. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Open Talent Report with Conor Heaney. If you found this podcast informative and engaging, make sure you subscribe, tell your friends, and follow us on all your favorite streaming platforms.